Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics show. And today's guest is an awesome gentleman that I've had the pleasure of chatting with today. His name is Chris Arnold from Little Zephyr Farm in the Manning Valley in New South Wales. Now, I highly recommend you go and check him out on socials, both all of the above, the farm. Uh, his own channel, which is Green Thumb Guru, as well as his wife has got plenty of amazing arts and craftsy things, I think, on there as well. But go and check out what they've got going on. Their family is doing some really, really amazing things on a 16-acre homestead block that they've purchased in the Manning Valley, and they've been converting it into a market garden to sell their produce and share it with the community. Chris has got some beautiful visions for the future of what he wants to do there on Little Zephyr Farm. So, without further ado, please welcome Chris to the show. And I'm sure you're going to learn and be inspired by a lot of what Chris has to say. So, let's jump straight in.
You just start off doing one thing in one little core of permaculture, and then it's like a spider web. That core there can expand into a whole nother network.
Yeah,
And then that network connects you with other people as well. And us as human beings, we are a species that need to be connected. Like if you look at every other species on this earth, like bees, I'm really into like my apiaries at the moment. We just set up another 4 colonies,
cool.
and the whole colony all works together as a community. It's like, and I look at the way I was thinking about the other day was like a beehive is like it's like a little village. It's like a small little community in a suburb,
It
and
really
there's
is.
thousands of bees in there, and they're all working together. And you look at like how some of our suburbs and our cities are kind of broken in a way where people aren't working together. And I think there's a lot that nature can teach us. I think what sparked my interest and my wife's interest early on, we're very both aligned in wanting to do similar sort of things. We've both got our own interests, but they all still overlap in a way as
Yes.
well. And it's probably from our early 20s. Watching a lot of Gardening Australia, I think watching a lot of Gardening Australia and like all the different segments on there, they show a really good range of what different people are up to in terms of gardening and all the different cores that come off gardening as well. Like things like community gardens as well. Like I've been involved in a community garden when I was living back at Newcastle, and that's great. You just get to meet so many different age groups of people that are all. Gardening is just it's not for one type of gender or an age group or religion
Yes.
or anything like that. It brings people together. So that kind of sparked our interest in our early 20s. And as soon as we bought our first home in our early 20s, yeah, just that drive to want to just grow something, and just
Yes.
starting off by planting that seed. You plant those first few seeds. You get some tomato seeds or whatever you order online, and then you just watch those little seeds start to grow week by week, and you're nurturing. We're always
Yes.
nurturing,
Hmm.
and it just yeah, it just starts that passion. And I do remember back in even like primary school, growing some things from seed. And as a child, it's just so exciting, like watching this little plant grow that, and you're just giving a little bit of water each day, and so it's yeah. So the passion from there sort of started like well back in my childhood.
That's
I
awesome.
was involved with my nan and pops. They had a wholesale nursery as well. So
Wow. Okay.
when we were in like primary school, I remember going down there for a whole week,
That's
slogging it out,
awesome.
working in the nan and pops nursery, getting up early. It was like a job basically for a full week. So,
Yeah.
we got to spend time with Nan and Pop and my uncle who was working in the nursery. But it taught us a lot on how to get to work on time, how to work hard, and then you're paid at the end of the week based on the effort that you put in.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about back then. It was probably more about just I'm here and I just want to get some money when you're a young kid. but we didn't realize what we were being taught, and that interest in gardening just naturally came without Nan and Pop and my uncle trying to push it on us.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a really interesting thing you're absorbing kind of just by being there and witnessing, but you're not necessarily really thinking as a child, like you said, that that's like exactly what you're
Totally.
learning. But you're in that
Yes.
environment where that's promoted and that's celebrated in a lot of ways is the growing and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
but man, you've touched on so many awesome things already. I think like just to backtrack and maybe double click on a couple of things, we the first thing you mentioned was that really like pricked my ears up was the thing about community and the bees and all of that kind of thing and what nature can teach us. And then backtracking through your story a little bit about how you are surrounded by gardening and that initially and seeing all of these things on Gardening Australia that inspire you. I feel
Yes.
like some people that often in the broken cities that you mentioned are very disconnected from this at a very young age. Like they're not exposed to the natural world in a way that, demonstrates how we need to be harmonious and working together and building this community, as you say. So, like
Yeah.
the importance of you being brought up in that kind of environment obviously shines through in the way that you run everything that you do, and same with your wife. Like it's very obvious that you guys, have it in terms of what to do. You're putting your mind to setting towards your goal and working towards harmonious work with nature. And the community, which is a massive, massive thing. That you're talking about
Exactly.
community gardens and things like this. So that's what I want to double click on first is this community thing. So you've now had a lot of work with community-based gardens and you're selling your produce at the markets and things like this to connect with locals, which is so fabulous. What's if you had to kind of describe it, what is that community feeling like for you? And what's the drive to connect with community? Why is that an important thing for you?
Yeah, it's like, when you're growing produce, that's come from the land, that's come from the earth, that starts from a seed, and it's like it's too good just to retain all that for yourself. And you can't just use all of the produce. So like it's about sharing. It's about sharing so many things. Sharing seeds, sharing like knowledge as
Hmm.
well, sharing the food, and then you get things back in return. Like you get the feedback from customers and you get that smile on their face,
Yes,
and it gives you a buzz. Like it's a bit of an adrenaline rush for me as well. Like I really like just, yes, seeing people enjoy your food, because it's like if there wasn't customers on the other end buying it, then you're kind of like, what's it all for? Like we can just do it for our family. That's cool. I would just downscale things, but I want to
yes,
upscale things. I want to keep growing. We're always growing, like
yeah,
physically in our size. I've grown as tall as I can, but our minds are still growing. You know what I
yes,
mean? So we're still growing and learning. And yeah, and it's just about passing on that knowledge as well to our
it
to our
is.
young generation coming through. And yeah, yep.
Yeah, we have this innate kind of like, I guess, willingness to express and share, and as you say, we need community. It seems that we need that as a basis to a happy and well lived life. So with um with the example of the bees, where you've got nature working together really well to kind of make positive impacts. Like we're moving the planet forwards. And I think there's not a lot of species like human beings that are on Earth that actually can make things better than where they found it. Do you know what I mean? Like we've
True. Yeah.
brought things all over the world. We're the best pollinators in the world. We're taking seeds and things and all sorts of stuff, increasing the biodiversity on this planet in a huge way. So by doing this stuff with the community, sharing the knowledge, sharing the seeds, we are essentially going and pollinating with knowledge and all of this stuff and sharing to our community.
I
And
really, I really like the way how you phrase that, like in terms of, yeah, exactly how bees pollinate. They're
that's
just
yeah.
pollinating, just, yeah, collecting pollen, and well, it's kind of like I don't. when I've watched bees, if you watch them closely, I was just watching one the other morning out in a sunflower,
Yeah,
and
I saw one of your videos of plenty of bees that I've been checking out on your thing. It looks so cool what you got set up.
oh, love them. They're just such a happy little insect and creature, just to have around. But I was watching them, and my observations were, are they collecting pollen or are they collecting nectar? Like I was watching it in the sunflower, and it was mainly focused on sucking out the nectar. And then
Okay.
it just happens to be collecting pollen on all of its fur and all of its body at the same time. And then it's like, oh, I've got all this pollen on me now. And you watch them, and they clean themselves when they collect a lot, and they're pushing it down to their legs. So they're kind of multitasking in a way,
Yeah.
because they're using both
Wow.
resources back that they take to the hive. The pollen is then the bee food that goes into feeding the brood. And then
Yeah.
the nectar is then converted into making honey, which is
Honey.
also another long-term food storage as well. So
Hmm.
they're such smart, efficient workers.
That's absolutely right. And the honey thing, as you say, like um, I'm not sure if this is true, but they found honey in the pyramids that was perfect, and it's like it's antibacterial, like all of, so it's not going to grow mold. It stays for such a long time. It's incredible the stuff that they
Yep,
make, and
unbelievable. Yeah,
yeah, so I love that passion of yours. That's a really cool little added bonus to gardening. But just going back to that, to the community, and another thing that you said was sort of sharing knowledge and passing down knowledge to your children and the kids in the next generation. Now, you've got a beautiful family that you are running this whole farm with cooperatively, by the looks of it, as much as you can with kids. So why don't you, if you can, just run us through a little bit about the experience with kids in this setting of growing food, how you're trying to involve them without, overbearing them, like you said, with that you can kind of kill the passion if you kind of saying, you got
yeah,
to do this and learn this and watch this, because that's so going through my mind with a child on the way, like thinking how I want to inspire them to have this
yep,
gardening
yep,
bug as well. So like, yeah, run us
exactly.
through that if you can.
My experience is like right from the day they were born, you know, you're bringing them out to the garden with you, like because we're kind of you reach this kind of like cross point. You need to get your day-to-day stuff done. You need to be doing like your cooking, washing, and cleaning and all that sort of stuff. And then if you're stuck and you're housebound, and then it's sort of it blocks you out from not being able to get out in the garden, but you've got to take them out in the garden with you, whether they're right from a young age, whether you can just put them in a pram or a bassinet, or you've got them in one of those carriers, and they're being exposed into that environment, and
Yeah.
they're listening to all the sounds of the birds, and getting the healthy vitamin D on their skin at the right time of the day. And your contact with soil, with healthy soil, you get that
Yes.
on your fingernails, and then that is transferred onto their skin. So they're being
Beautiful.
exposed from a young age, to build up their immune system. It's so important that us from a young age has a healthy immune system, so we're set for adulthood.
Yes. Yes.
Like a saying I've heard is, a young tree, a young seed sapling tree planted into a mature forest, it's not going to have the strength to grow through there.
Yeah.
Um, they because it's just too young. So it's like you need to introduce, a tree into. They need to all grow together. Like and they all work in crossing over energy under the root system.
That's
Under
right.
there's
Yeah.
there's so much that happens beneath the soil. We're all looking at what's happening above,
Yeah, that's
but
right.
we're not really learning
The
what we
magic is
can't see.
underneath. That's right.
There's lots of magic with all that mycelium network, and that's another core that I'm getting into as well, is mushrooms
Cool.
that we can talk about later.
Yeah,
But
awesome.
yeah, introducing kids from a young age, and coming back to what we are talking about before, when I was working in my and pop's nursery, I was unknowingly getting exposed to that avenue of going down that pathway of gardening without even knowing it. But I think with kids, if you push anything on them, if you push sport on them, or music, or interest, what you're interested in. If as soon as you push anybody into something, they're not going to want to do it. Most people, you hit that resilience and they're going to bounce back and they're going to want to do the opposite, some
Yes.
people. So
Yes.
you've got to try to introduce them and bring them into it without forcing them to do it. And it's
Yeah.
like it's hard to do that. So it's kind of like you got to bring them out there and let them want to come out. Like I see my kids come out and hang out with the roosters and the chickens and giving them a
Cool.
feed, and I let them out and watch them free roam. My daughter just loves just, pottering around the garden, just looking at flowers and stuff like
That's
that.
awesome.
They love picking veg, going and picking snow peas and pulling
Yeah.
up that sort of stuff. So it's all those little things that I think are going to generate a lot of long-term memories later in life, and they're gonna remember back those days of what a fresh snow pea tasted like to pull it straight off the plant and the
Yeah,
sugar
and
content
how
that you
long
get
and
from it.
it took to grow it and or the effort that it went into to make that happen, you know. They see you
Exactly.
out
So I think
there
with
all the time doing it.
exactly. So that's a big thing that works, I find, with kids from a young age is getting them to taste the food, seeing where the food comes from and what it looks like, being
Yeah.
able to identify what plant is what. Like my 4-year-old Angus, he can come out and he goes, that's a tomato, that's a
Nice.
carrot, that's a potato, and
Perfect.
so where most kids. I heard someone say the other day that a young little toddler was telling their parents that the potatoes didn't come from the farmer. The farmer didn't grow them. Like Coles or Woolworths was growing them.
Oh
You go
no.
and that, yeah. So it's
Oh no.
so that
Yeah.
hearing that there's obviously a breakdown in the education from the young kids not being exposed enough to
Yeah.
to farms. And that's something that I do have an interest and a passion to someday. I don't know when. I do want to be able to open my farm up to my community.
Cool.
I'm not at that point yet, but I would love to do like one afternoon a week. Local families can come out. So it's like it's the parents plus the kids,
Yeah.
and you have it marked out. This is where you can pick. This is ready. This isn't. And I'm teaching them, and then
That's
they get
awesome.
to free roam and go and pick their own produce. Takes away a bit of manual labor for me as well, because it does
True.
take a lot of time
Yeah.
in picking for markets. But what it more is generating is that connection to my local community to know where their food's coming from, how it's grown, what it looks like, and they get to pick it themselves.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah,
cool. Chris,
yeah.
that's perfect because that's we need more people like you doing things to share that. I know like not everybody has to like something I talk about a lot is n not having to do it on such a scale like yourself. Like you're obviously very skilled. You've been doing it for a long time to be able to produce at this scale. And as it gets bigger, you know you need more help and you need more hours and all of this. So not everybody's going to be in that position or with the land, but if someone is looking like to find some land, be it a quarter of an acre up to something like yourself, 16 acres plus, um, what were your first kind of like A, was it a blank slate completely? And B, what sort of things were you first thinking about tackling when you got there? Like what was priority number one, two, three, for example?
Oh, mate, as soon as we landed here, like I couldn't express the excitement and the
Yeah.
energy that was coming. We came from a 300 square meter block prior
Wow.
to here.
Yeah, okay.
So, like, it was like gardening for me was just flipped on this complete opposite
That's
scale
so
compared
cool.
to what I
Yeah.
was used to working with. I had so many, where I was stuck in this box and I had so many restraints, like I had so many restraints with space.
Yeah.
The main killer was light. I didn't have enough sunlight that come into my previous backyard.
Yeah.
So it limited my crops of what I could grow. And it's hard to accept, like, when you want to grow like that perfect homegrown tomato, but you don't have enough sunlight. It's hard just to go like, oh, I can't grow them, and just to accept like not including that in your summer kind of, vegetable that you want to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Garlic as well. Like I tried for like I've been growing vegetables for probably 14 years now. And I think for the solid 12 years that were in our last property, every year I kept on trying and I kept on failing.
No.
And I had my first reasonable garlic harvest last year.
I saw you had
Grown
some at
it.
the markets recently too.
Yeah, yep. So this is second year now, and
Yeah.
I learn a lot from last year. I could look at my mistakes that I made, and then I sort of worked off that, and then I've still got a few areas to tweak this year. But seeing the growth and the progress from last year to this year, I can see that I'm heading in the right direction. So you
Yeah.
start to learn, and then once you've gone bang, I've got that nailed. You stick with what works.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. It takes time to learn the property too, and like where, like, you got to see it in a lot of rain or not much rain for 2 weeks, or you've got to see it with high winds, like where that take away your veggie tunnels and things like this. Like,
Yeah,
all of that
exactly.
kind of stuff. Like you don't know what it's going to be like until you've lived there for a certain amount of time. So,
Yeah, yep, totally. But coming back to your original question, because sorry, I can get on a bit of
not
a
all good. So can
um,
I.
ramble off. But coming back to your original question, like as soon as we landed here, it's like, where do you start? It was a very blank canvas. Around the house site, um, wasn't really an area that was earmarked of where I wanted to grow vegetables. It was very maintained, so there was a lot of grass that was neatly cut. Where I'm doing a lot of the growing at the moment, down in the paddock, I call it. We were talking grass that was like
Wow.
chest high. I think it was that Soteria grass, which is really, it
Yeah.
clumps
Okay.
up. It's really
Yeah.
hard to get off. It's hard to mow through it as well. That took months. Like I didn't
Wow.
have a lot of machinery. I've done a lot of it. I don't have a tractor. The heaviest
Wow.
bit of equipment I've got would probably be my ride-on mower, which I've given a good workout,
Yeah.
and the rotary hoe. I've just got a little Rover rotary
Yep.
hoe, which does a lot of the groundwork.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was the first task of like getting
And
down to that paddock, which would probably be about 3 to 4 acres so far, and I've probably only
wow.
really starting to. It might be sitting about 1,000 to 2,000 square meters. I've kind of got it divided into two spots. I've got it sort of set up with one area that I'm fencing off is more just for like the rows of veggies, and then on
Yeah.
the opposite side of that, I'm starting to get into syntropic garden lines. So I'm sort of
Cool.
doing garden lines, putting in my future long-term crops, leaving a grass corridor, just one or two passes of the
Yeah.
ride-on mower, just a bit of grass in between, so just to create some proper spacing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I'm going to grow that space. So I'm kind of working on that on the sideline, and that's going
Cool.
to take time. But while I'm
Yeah.
waiting for all of those big long-term future trees to grow, I'm into planting and I'm using that space beneath them to be growing things like, your quick turnover crops like sweet potato, parsley, rocket, got some lettuce in there, you name it, like any
Yeah.
ground covers that I can put in. So I'm going to layer. It's always going to have layers from the top, middle ground, right down
Yeah,
to
I
the ground.
saw I'm not sure what time frame this video was on your Instagram, but you were basically showing how you had some strawberries growing and then you had some bok choy in next to it, and you were explaining how the different levels of canopy up to your bananas and providing the different levels of shade for the plants. And I thought like that kind of thinking and how you're interplanting the different things and that are working together, like that shows in the produce at the end. Like it shows in the soil health, it shows in how you can be smart to grow different things in full sun, where that, say, like a bok choy or a lettuce is not going to grow in full sun all day. So having those, that banana shade is really clever. And like I think people should really go and check out some of your videos that you've got up there, because it is really cool to see your techniques in setting up these different vegetable rows and crops, and um, how you're thinking about rotating stuff and growing stuff for market and for season.
Totally, Jordan. Like it's that my big saying I keep on saying to myself is work with nature, don't work against it.
Hmm.
When you start to think that way and you're working with nature, you find the processes in gardening just become so much more fluid and easy, because it's just nature just does as it's intended,
Yeah,
So and I think it's like setting up those layerings of the different crops that you can interplant. You can do that practice in any climate. You can do it in the subtropics. You can do it in our area where we are here in the I'm just trying to remember where we're at. We're in that kind of mid north coast. I think we're in that
Yeah,
temperate kind of. Yeah, it sort of
sort
gets
of
a bit
temperate.
tropical kind of. Yeah, it's in that
Well, it's sort
slight
it,
tropical,
who
but it's
knows at the
quite
moment?
humid.
Hey,
Yeah.
it's like the weather is all over the place, so who know
It
who
sure
knows?
is. And then going right down to Victoria, where they get 4 seasons in one, and Tasmania, you've just got to pick your right crops,
Yes.
like whether you want to incorporate blueberries into the mix, because like most blueberries will become deciduous
Yes,
in
yes.
the cooler months as well. So that opens up some that opens up some sunlight to be able to come through
Clever,
for
yes.
your ground covers in winter. So you just got to think. You just got to know each plant,
Yeah,
what it can do. If one's going to be stronger and outcompete other crops, then it's probably not the best to mix them together. That example that you were talking about, how I've got the strawberries, which are my main long-term crop that I'm planning to. I want them just to smother that whole bed,
cool, yeah.
and have blueberries in the middle, strawberries underneath. But while I was waiting for them, for the strawberries to get up and get going, I had some little sorry, I had some little bok choy seedlings, and I thought, I know that they're a quick crop. They're going to
Yeah.
take about 30 days roughly from like seedling stage to get up and harvest.
Yeah.
And I think they actually grew quicker, and they smothered the strawberries a bit. They moved that quick. So timing is challenging as well in picking that time of like, not
hmm
always will you get it right,
No,
but
of course.
that's where when one crop is growing quicker than another, that's when us as humans come in as we're there to maintain, right?
Yeah.
So you're cutting things back to make sure each crop is getting the sufficient light that it needs. And as I was doing that, so I've got down in that space, I did also had silver beet. So I knew that silver beet was going to be hanging around much longer than what the bok
hmm
choy was. So as I'm clearing out the bok choy, silver beet's there next in line, and then once the silver beet's gone, then I've got the strawberries, which will be there long term. But
Yeah.
as I'm coming through and I'm cleaning up, and I'm taking off any leaves that have got slugs that have had a bit of a feast and they're chewing through there, cleaning through, chuck them all into a tub, and I've got my chook pen next door, dump it in. Chooks get their daily feed. So you kind of try to incorporate that daily practice
Yeah.
into just a day-to-day life. Yeah,
It
yep,
looks, yeah, from the way that you've got it set up and explaining it, it looks like you're, as you say, really working with nature and how if there's already these inbuilt symbiosis and relationships in between different plants and different soil systems, and as you were talking about the fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi or the network underneath, it's it's like it's just working with what works and not trying to battle too much against it. And as you say, things are not always going to work. So having an enclosed loop where you've got animal husbandry and things where you can like be throwing stuff to the chooks, which then generate eggs, which then generate more food for you and fertilizer, and it's just the whole circle is complete. And that you're throwing stuff into the compost, which is then generating good compost to then go back and feed the soil. So it's not all wasted every time you kind of make some sort of mistake. Um,
totally.
we've got just want to touch on the mushroom fascination because I know you said that we could talk about that because that's something that I really want to get into because my wife loves mushrooms. She loves to eat mushrooms, or like all the different types of mushrooms, obsessed. So I said to her, I promise when I get it together and work it out, I'll get onto growing you some mushrooms and stuff. So talk to us about your interest in mushrooms, and kind of what areas of mushrooms and mycelium are you interested in?
Yeah, yeah. So same sort of thing with how one thing can spark and grow into wherever it's going to grow in life. I think kind of tasting that really nice like oyster mushroom or a shiitake. I think when you taste that out of the cafe and how it's being used and the texture and how it can kind of replace meat as well. Like I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I just like to mix up your food source. I think
Yeah.
it's healthy to have a good diverse range of food that we
Yep.
eat. Um, yeah, that kind of like, yeah, and I just find them fascinating how, this like a spider web, like the mycelium is this full network and how that can produce, like a seed. It's
Yeah.
basically like how a seed, like, the seed in terms with the mushroom would be like its spore. So those spores get spread.
That's
And
right.
then that network goes to grow again. Like another little community is also growing and it's got a food source there. And it's mycelium is probably one of the oldest living organisms on this earth when you think about it.
And
Um,
largest or something, isn't it? Some of them, they can be these
yeah,
huge networks. Yeah.
yeah, that's all underground and they
Mm.
all tap together and they're working with certain trees that help move food source around. And yeah, I'm only just at like the tipping point, but like the very starting point of trying to learn where it's all at. So
Yeah.
tasting those beautiful mushrooms, seeing other people on my accounts growing them, you're like, yeah. I'm like, I'm already doing enough, but like, let's just give it a go. Let's just like, it
Yeah.
doesn't look too complicated. They grow naturally in the wild, and we're just here as a facilitator to help kind of do it on a bit more of a managed scale. So yeah, Aussie mushroom suppliers, they're great. So they're down in Victoria. So
Yeah.
when I was living back in Newcastle, we just started off just doing a couple of little boxes. You get a little box like a grow kit. You
Yeah.
get it sent out. It's already all grown and expanded in that in the plastic bag. You just cut it open, give it a bit of a mist down every couple of days. Voila, a couple
And
of
it's,
weeks time, you've
yeah.
got you've got some the mushrooms or whatever variety you've got popping out, and you'll get a couple of flushes. You'll get a couple of like harvests over a period of a couple of weeks. Done,
Yeah.
So that was my start, my first kind of start several years ago. Worked quite well. And just recently, in the last couple of weeks, I've just been down in a section on our property. We've got a lot of bushland. Our 16 acres is probably broken up to be probably about 75, 80% bush, and
Yeah.
the rest of it's at the front is all sort of, where I'm managing
Yeah. Cool.
day-to-day activities. So just picked a nice little spot down the bush. The process was basically sacrificing, doing a bit of a thin. So I took down two trees and I didn't want to. I feel bad cutting a tree down, but the purpose, how resourceful I was with utilizing that tree was the lower part of the trunk is a little bit of firewood. So that was some really big, thick
Yeah.
logs,
Awesome.
making forward preparation for firewood collection next year. And then when I come down into the 20 to 30 centimeter kind of diameter logs,
Yeah.
roughly about sort of a meter long, that's where I was able to utilize two gum trees and I think I got, I think it was about 16 logs, and I inoculated, those all those logs over
Wow.
six varieties of mushrooms. So I've put in 600 plugs, so
Wow.
each variety was 100 plugs, and that's just setting something up for the future.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's wicked because that'll
yeah,
give you a couple of years, hopefully, of some mushroom flushes, right?
Yeah,
Is that the
best
idea?
case scenario, I've heard some mushrooms if you put them in the right conditions, and it also depends on the size of the log, how much food source is in there for them to feed off
Yeah.
year after year. Best case scenario, I've heard some fruiting for like 5 to 7 years. So
Yeah. Wow.
look, 3 or 4
That's
that'd be magic.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
cool. I like Chris, that's wicked. I think from what I've learned about the mushroom stuff, and like I came into it initially from figuring out the health benefits of having the tinctures of some of these things, like the lion's mane
yeah.
and that kind of thing. So I kind of got introduced that way, and I was thinking, oh, this is, really cool. I can start growing them, but then tasting them, it was just like, wow, you start to really understand the different complex flavors and it isn't that difficult to grow because they are so beautifully structured as part of nature's kind of like it's just already built into the system. You just have to facilitate, as you said. You took the word right out of my mouth, but that's yeah, that's really really fascinating. And there we have it, guys. A beautiful conversation there with Chris. Once again, I'm going to reiterate, please go and check out all of Chris and his wife and his family's social channels. I found Chris on Instagram and I was following so many of his videos and learning so much myself. So I highly recommend you go and check that out. Thanks again to Chris for his time and taking the time to share some knowledge with us today. Hopefully, we can have Chris back on the podcast again soon. if you have any questions, if you want to add to this conversation, please reach out to me on any of my social media channels or comment on the episode, share the episode around. We want to get as many ears on this as possible just to really build this community focus on teaching our next younger generation and getting more people inspired to be in the garden. So thank you very much for watching the Shed Organic Show this time around, and we'll see you again very soon.